When someone looks at a failed morning routine and says, "I guess I'm just not a disciplined person," they're not just describing a problem, they're making the problem harder to solve. The idea that character is a binary trait you either have or you don't is a category error, and it quietly produces a lot of unnecessary despair. Take the person who sets a 5 a.m. alarm for a week, misses it twice, and then concludes they simply lack something essential. That conclusion becomes the real obstacle because it replaces concrete curiosity with a fixed identity. The world hands us this frame all the time. We say someone just isn't that kind of person, as if character were a permanent substance you're born with or without. But a binary answer to a skill question doesn't just misdiagnose the issue, it stops you from practicing. The better model is older than the self-help aisle. Aristotle used the word hexis for character, not a passive personality stamp, but an acquired, stable disposition that deepens through repeated action in specific contexts. It's not a box you check. It's more like a groove worn into the mind by what you actually do, over and over, in a particular part of your life. That means we can stop asking the dead-end question, "Am I a good person?" and start asking something more alive. What am I practicing, and under what circumstances? The purpose of ethics, Aristotle argued, was never just to know what goodness is. It was to become good, to build the quiet capacity to think, feel, and act well where it counts. That's a fundamentally practical project, and it changes who you are, but it doesn't require you to already be someone else. It's completely fair that the binary framing feels true. We use character language as a form of social sorting, a shortcut for deciding who to trust or hire or date. The pop psychology metaphor, willpower is a muscle, seems helpful, but it actually reinforces the same mistake. It treats morality as a single, general capacity you either have more or less of, rather than a bundle of context-specific skills. This framing backfires in two predictable ways. If you believe character is inborn and you fall short, you land in moral despair. I guess I don't have it. If you believe it's inborn and you want to protect your self-image, you rationalize. Well, that's just how I am. Neither path leaves room for growth. And here's the irony: the folk wisdom, "fake it till you make it," accidentally gets closer to the truth than the muscle metaphor because it hints at habituation. But without a clear model underneath, even that phrase can feel like pretending rather than genuinely building. The evidence that character is trainable rather than fixed doesn't come from a single perfect experiment. Instead, you get converging signals from philosophy, developmental science, and real-world programs. The philosophical root is clear. Aristotle's hexis isn't a feeling or an impulse or a mere potential. His translator Joe Sachs renders it as active condition, something you maintain by exercising it in the right way, in the right domain. A virtue isn't a one-off good deed. It's a characteristic disposition to think, feel, and act well in a particular area of life, and it involves both reasoning and emotion. After a long period where moral philosophy lost this vocabulary, it was revived in 1958 by Elizabeth Anscombe, who argued that modern ethics had become obsessed with rules and obligations while forgetting the question of what kind of person you are becoming. That revival opened the door to a modern science of character. The strongest empirical anchor is a large randomized trial. In Hawaii, 20 elementary schools were matched and randomly assigned to a comprehensive character education program called Positive Action. Over several years, students in the program didn't just behave better. Their reading scores rose by nearly 10%, math scores by almost 9%, absenteeism dropped by more than 15%, and suspensions fell by over 70% compared to control schools. These are not trivial ripples. They suggest that deliberate, structured character education can reshape real-life trajectories. Long-term research by Tyler Vander Weel and others has reinforced this picture, tracing how character strengths predict well-being, health, and flourishing decades later, not as moral abstractions, but as durable life skills. But how does this work in the brain's everyday machinery? Character is built through habit loops, not through heroic acts of resolve. Every behavior sits inside a loop. A cue triggers a routine, and the routine delivers some kind of reward. You don't become more honest by staring at your reflection and commanding yourself to be honest. You become more honest by redesigning cues and rewards that make honesty the natural path, repeated until it no longer feels like effort. Recent experimental work drives this home. Even subtle environmental cues can shift moral behavior. In a 2026 study with Chinese middle school students, Researchers found that simply exposing students to morality-related cues in the room increased honest behavior. Context is not a minor add-on, it's part of the skill. Developmentally, adolescence stands out as a critical window for building character strengths, a time when identity and habit scaffolding are especially plastic. But the window doesn't slam shut. Character development is lifelong. Your future disposition 12 months or 12 years from now will be the evolution of what you practice today. This is the opposite of the binary frame. It says you are never done and you are never disqualified. Now, this argument would be too clean if we ignored the counter-evidence. Some research finds that believing character is malleable can backfire. Incremental theorists about moral character, people who think it can change, sometimes cheat more, possibly because a malleability belief makes a single transgression feel less threatening. I'll fix it later. And character education programs show real effects, but those effects vary widely. The positive action results are impressive, but not every program replicates them, because implementation quality matters enormously. So the honest conclusion is not that character is infinitely and easily trainable. It's that character is trainable, but it's not magic. It requires structured environments, sustained practice, and a respect for the fact that early attempts often feel fake or forced. The practical move, then, is to stop asking, "Do I have character?" and start asking 3 more useful questions. What am I practicing? In what context? With what cues? First, pick one specific domain and one small repeated action. Do not try to become a globally virtuous person. That's like trying to learn 5 instruments at once. Decide that for the next 2 months you will practice punctuality not everywhere, but with one weekly meeting, and the practice might be as unglamorous as laying out your clothes the night before so you don't scramble in the morning. Scott Young describes this as closer to engineering a bridge than proving your moral worth. You're not building a monument to your goodness. You're building a structure that can carry a small, real load every day. Second, design the environment, not yourself. The cues and rewards that shape a habit loop matter far more than raw resolve. If you want to practice generosity, don't rely on feeling generous when the opportunity arises. Put a small recurring reminder in your calendar to check in on a friend, and let the cue do the work until the routine feels natural. The virtue ethics tradition would add that this is not just behavioral engineering in a moral vacuum. The choice of what to practice is itself a moral act. The method can be mechanical, the direction you point it in is not. Third, expect the gap between what the philosopher Rosalind Hursthouse calls continence and genuine virtue. Continence is white-knuckling. You do the right thing while still desperately wanting to do the wrong thing. Genuine virtue is when your feelings have caught up with your actions, and you do the right thing with the right emotions on the right occasions. The point is not to pretend you're already there. The point is to recognize that white-knuckling is a phase, not a permanent failure. Fake it till you make it, in this light, isn't fraud, it's practice. And practice, repeated in good enough contexts, eventually reshapes the wanting itself. Think back to that person who missed the alarm and said, "I'm just not a disciplined person." The problem was never whether they possessed the substance of character. The problem was what they were practicing at that 5 a.m. moment and what they'd practice next. If you take the binary frame seriously, a single failure becomes evidence of a permanent flaw and an excuse to stop trying. If you take the skill frame seriously, a single failure is just information about the cue, the context, or the routine, not about your moral essence. 12 months from now, your character will be the evolution of what you repeatedly do. That's not a threat. It's a quiet, forgiving, and genuinely practical way to become.